Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Ready. Hey guys, ready to learn? If you are not ready to learn, you're in the wrong class. Home ec is down the hall. Go make me a sandwich. Is that rude? Or just sit in the back and help me, all right? Basil II, the final battle. I gotta fix my thing here, because I can't see it when I go full screen. All right, guys. Original link to the video from History March, top of the description, preemptive like. Legacy of the last Roman Emperor. So, this is part 7. I'm going to say this. I recommend you watching the previous parts. That's obviously up to you. Let's go.
By the close of the first decade of the 11th century, Emperor Basil II has held the ultimate power in Constantinople for 3 decades. In that time, he pushed the Roman Empire's borders back to their ancient line on the Danube River, entering places where the Roman standards have not been seen in centuries. Simultaneously, he has campaigned in the south and east against the Islamic caliphates, winning great success and keeping the empire's 1,000-year presence in Syria alive. The realm was at its greatest size in almost 400 years, and its treasury full due to prudent economic policies. Basil was now in his 50s. No other emperor was revered as highly as him since the time of Justinian. But no Caesar is ever without his challengers, however, and 2 youthful upstarts at opposite ends of the empire are stalking the old lion, looking for signs of weakness. Could the Lombard Melos of Apulia and the newly
Marwanids? A lot of names I've never heard of. Armenian, obviously, I've heard of. Circassia?
Could the Lombard Melos of Apulia and the newly crowned King George I from the Caucasus Mountains overthrow the longest reigning Roman emperor in history, a man so noted for his prowess in battle that he became known as the Bulgar Slayer? But before we continue, I want to welcome back a returning sponsor, a stock media subscription service that I actually...
So guys, you can fast forward if you want. Go ahead, but it's his video, it's his content. I'm going to watch through whatever ads he has. If he has any promo codes and links, I want to make sure to see those and use those if you're interested, all right?
To make better videos. Thank you, Storyblocks, for supporting this video. Check this out. Typing Roman Empire in the search gives me all of these awesome clips, or if I type in Roman Army, I get even more great videos that I can use if I want to make a video about ancient Rome. To make it on YouTube, you have to keep making better videos, and with Storyblocks, the possibilities are endless. You pay one set price and you get unlimited downloads of all this stuff. There's over 1 million 4K HD assets, templates, music, sound effects, images, and more. And you can download as much as you want, 100% royalty-free, for use on your own YouTube channel, personal or commercial projects. There are no hidden fees. And get this, customizable DaVinci Resolve templates are now available in your Storyblocks, so you can create better videos faster. From motion graphics to animated sequences, DaVinci Resolve templates are essential to creating professional-looking videos at scale. Long
Stay
before
hydrated,
Storyblocks
guys.
sponsored my channel, I'd been using their service for years back in my freelancing days, years before I became a YouTuber. That's because this is the best place to find assets for very cheap. I can vouch for the quality of their service, and it's a very small price to pay to enhance your creativity with access to millions of assets on their website.
All right, back.
So thank you again to Storyblocks for supporting my channel. There's a link in my description, storyblocks.com/historymarsh. Clicking that link helps support my channel, but it also allows you to get started with this amazing service for unlimited stock media at one set price. All right, now let's return to medieval carnage.
Okay.
In Italy, the southern lands are still firmly in imperial hands, along with the western coastal areas around Gaeta, Napoli, and Amalfi. But in 1009, nearly all Lombard principalities of the Mezzogiorno rally behind Melus of Apulia and his brother Datus in an attempt to establish Lombard independence and expel the Roman imperial apparatus. Melus seems to genuinely believe in a kind of Lombard nationalism, though it goes without saying that any Lombard kingdom will have him as its monarch. While the Calabrian region has been Greek in culture for millennia, Apulia is stalwartly Lombard, a people who have yet to fully assimilate into Italian culture. In addition to heavy Roman taxation and military service, Apulia is also in prime position to endure the
Classic people using accusations of imperialism for their own gain. That's
worst of
nothing
North
new.
African pirate raids, growing in intensity since the fall of Sicily in the 9th century. Every year, thousands of Apulians are loaded onto slave boats bound for North Africa, and the Romans seem to have no ability to stop these attacks other than encouraging local militias. These local forces, who have their own naval component, are primed for Melus's message of independence. This rise of Lombard hostilities would eventually escalate into a direct clash between the two most powerful states in Europe, the Holy Roman Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire. Simultaneously, in the east, another
So the Franks aren't yet powerful enough to take that title as most,
empire.
comparable to these two.
Simultaneously, in the east, another conflict was about to be ignited as the newly established kingdom of Georgia was growing ever more militant. To recover territories lost to the Roman Empire in the last decade of the 10th century, George I works to establish an alliance with Fatimid Egypt. We do not inherit the land from our ancestors, we borrow it from our descendants. No less energetic than his young...
What? We do not inherit the land from our ancestors. We borrow it from our descendants. So that's just saying we're conquering this for our future?
descendants. No less energetic than his younger self, the old Emperor Basil prepares to meet the new challenges head-on and secure his hard-won conquests for his successors. Melus's bid for Lombard independence starts in Bari and then spreads to Ascoli and Trani. The Roman governor of the region, or Catapan, John Curcus, is killed by the rebels, but his successor, Basil Mesordanites, marshals the resources of the province and, along with some effective bribes, takes back Bari. Melus's first rebellion implodes instantly. He escapes to take refuge in Salerno with its ruler, Guimard III, but his wife and children are taken hostage and sent to captivity in Constantinople. After several years of gathering supporters throughout the principalities of southern Italy, Melus begins to grow bold enough to attack Imperial Italy again.
Wait. Salerno being... Okay, it's not in...
To have no ability...
Okay, so they sided with the Byzantines there?
In 1016, a group of 250 Norman pilgrims passes through the...
Okay. Okay, I was confused there. So... What?
Italian town. But his wife and children are taken hostage and sent to captivity in Constantinople. After several years of gathering support,
that doesn't make any sense.
Throughout the principalities of southern Italy, Melus begins to grow bold enough to attack Imperial Italy again. In 1016, a group of 250 Norman pilgrims passes through the Italian town of Gargano on their way to the shrine at Mont Sant'Angelo. The man in charge of this band is Rainulf Drengo, a Norman baron who has been exiled from northern France after murdering a relative of Richard II.
All right, I can't just go over that without at least asking something. So Melus went over to Salerno and then to seek refuge, and then had the people, the rulers in Salerno, captive in the Eastern Roman Empire. I'm not going to stop the video for this, but that is a little confusing.
Been exiled from northern France after murdering a relative of Richard II of Normandy, the grandfather of William the Conqueror. On their way to the shrine, the Normans are intercepted by Melus, who initially amuses the rough northerners with his manner and what they think is his effeminate style of dress. Nevertheless, Melus makes a convincing case when he explains his aim of liberating the entire Lombard region, and when he explains his aim of liberating the entire Lombard region, and the Normans are certainly tempted by the riches of the warm and bountiful countryside. Melus recruits Drango's men. They promise to assist Melus once they have had a chance to return north and gather some more of their countrymen. The next year, 1017, the crew of Norman mercenaries and their new employer link with the rest of Melus's army at Capua. Not long after, Melus and his men invade Imperial Apulia from the north. By the end of 1017, the joint Norman-Lombard forces occupied much of northern Apulia. Worried about the situation in Italy, Basil dispatches reinforcements of Roman regulars, Bulgarians, and his own northern warriors, who have arrived courtesy of Vladimir I of...
Guys, I'm not very comfortable with my confusion that I have in the past 2 minutes, but I'm going to keep going forward.
Kiev, northern warriors, who have arrived courtesy of Vladimir I of Kiev, to whom Basil gifted the hand of his sister Anna in marriage. This ferocious contingent is coming to make a name for themselves in the palaces of Constantinople and a wider realm of the empire, the Varangian Guard. The new commander of Roman Calabria and Apulia, Basil Boioannes, proves extremely effective. Boioannes meets Melus close to the Ofanto River, not too far away from Cannae, where 1200 years before, the Roman...
Hannibal. Maybe... no. My favorite battle I've ever learned about is Cannae. It was so incredible.
Suffered one of their most infamous defeats against Hannibal. Just as in that ancient battle, the Romans of Basil's time vastly outnumber their enemy. It is said that they swarmed like bees from a hive over the battlefield, and to the daunted Normans and Lombards, it appeared that when their long lances were held upright, they looked like a field of cane. The heavily armored cataphracts run roughshod over the rebels, who it said fought bravely, but only to put off the inevitable. By the end of the day, Melus's host was overrun and driven off the field. After annihilating Melus's army, Basil's Varangians convinced the surviving number of their Norman cousins to enter Roman service. This decision to recruit the Normans in Italy rather than vanquish them would eventually enable the Normans to push both of their former employers, the Romans and Lombards, out of power in Italy. In the early 11th century, however, they proved to be an excellent addition to the imperial garrison in Italy. Soon after his defeat, Melus's cause once more collapses, forcing him to seek refuge within the court of the Holy Roman Emperor, Henry II. Boioannes, meanwhile, sets out to secure the frontiers of his province. By 1019, he adds some Lombard territory to his cataparnate, and work begins on a chain of fortifications along the full width of the peninsula, with the aim of protecting the imperial domains from any northern incursions. The decisive victory at Cannae caused both the principalities of Capua, Benevento, and Salerno to shift their loyalties towards Constantinople, turning their back on their formal suzerain, Henry II, the Holy Roman Emperor.
So is the Eastern Roman, are the Byzantines, the Eastern Romans under Basil II right now, how did they view Christianity exactly? And are they do they agree with the Papal States, or is the Papal State seen as an enemy?
Boioannes also captures Melus's brother Datus and has him executed in the old Roman style. Datus is shoved into a sack along with a monkey, a snake,
I've
and a
heard
rooster,
of this.
and then thrown into a river.
Oh my god, I've heard of that.
Given that Boioannes serves an emperor that once had more than 10,000 prisoners of war blinded and pitifully marched back home to their kinsmen in Bulgaria, this stern medicine is not surprising. It seems to have enraged the Pope and, of course, Melus, and they both prevail upon their patron.
Whoa.
Prisoners of war. Boioannes serves an emperor that was thrown into a river. Given that Boioannes serves an emperor that once had more than 10,000 prisoners of war blinded and pitifully marched back home to their kinsmen in Bulgaria, this stern medicine is not surprising. It seems to have enraged the Pope and, of course, Melus, and they both prevail upon their patron Henry for retributive justice.
That answers my question.
The simultaneous loss of Capua, Benevento, and Salerno, and with them the vital pass of Monte Cassino, has opened the road to Rome for Basil's forces. For the first time in many years, perhaps even centuries, the emperor in Constantinople appears to have a chance at conquering the entire peninsula up to the Alps. Henry, with so much of his symbolic power and legitimacy resting on control of Rome, cannot allow this. In 1021, Henry launches an invasion in Italy. Having one of the mightiest armies in Europe on their doorstep no doubt unnerves both Basils, yet Boioannes has done his best to prepare for this invasion. Henry's force is split into three columns. The first is under the command of Pilgrim, Archbishop of Cologne, and travels down the...
I never knew about the relationship between the Eastern Romans, Byzantines, and the Holy Roman Empire, so this is very fascinating.
Western seaboard to Pilgrim, Archbishop of Cologne, and travels down the western seaboard to bring the recalcitrant Lombard duchies there back under the Western banner. Passing through Capua and then taking hostages after a month-long siege of Salerno, Pilgrim leaves to join Henry, who travels down the eastern coast, and Poppo, Archbishop of Aquileia, who has traveled down the central Apennines before they meet with the Pope at Benevento. The three columns converge at Troia and place the fortress under siege in the early days of April 1022. The huge army fails to make a dent in Boioannes' defenses or to upset his Norman garrison. The possession of Troia is necessary for Henry to proceed south, but its defenses in the mountains are too great a challenge.
Three armies conversing on the city weren't enough to break it?
And there is no success in persuading any of the defenders into treachery, as Pilgrim had done at Capua. The weeks turn into months, and the inevitable heat of a South Italian summer begins to wear on the North European troops. By June, dysentery and malaria spread, slowly melting Henry's ranks. In addition, the Holy Roman Emperor suffers discomfort due to a gallstone. Seeing no other option, Henry decides to return to Germany, effectively abandoning his campaign.
Wow. Troia, MVP.
Boioannes has stopped the biggest army of Western Europe without even leaving his base at Bari.
He's got to give it to Troya.
Much
Defenders
like his Roman
there.
ancestor Fabius with Hannibal over 1,000 years previously, the Catapan had defeated the invaders by avoiding an open battle with them. Furthermore, Basil II's ability to recognize and appoint talented commanders had saved the day. But while Henry II's invasion of Italy unfolded, Basil II's own campaigning is directed elsewhere. By the late 1010s, tensions on the eastern fringes of the Roman Empire are reaching a boiling point. The newly established Georgian kingdom and its young and rash king, George I, has ignited the conflict. Back in 1014, the newly crowned monarch of Georgia had occupied Roman territory and secured many alliances with the local Armenian, Georgian, and...
This is one of the issues I have, is that was the Roman Empire prior to the fall, the split of East and West, just so much better militarily that other surrounding powers couldn't stand a chance? Or, what I'm more likely to believe from what I've learned, or are there just so much more capable armies surrounding the Eastern Roman Empire that the Roman Empire before the collapse didn't have to deal with? You know, so were the Romans prior to the collapse better at crushing enemies around them, or were the enemies around the Eastern Romans just better than what the Romans prior to the split had to face? Does that make sense? All right.
And Kurdish secured many alliances with the local Armenian, Georgian, and Kurdish principalities. However, his most significant diplomatic success was his pact with the unstable Fatimid Caliph al-Hakim, who in 1009 had ordered the burning of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Perhaps unsurprisingly, this alliance fell apart following the mysterious disappearance of the Mad Caliph in 1021.
Okay.
This curious event presents a perfect opportunity for Basil II. Around the same year, the 63-year-old emperor musters an army of close to 30,000 and sets out for the east. Aiming to surprise his enemies, Basil keeps his ultimate destination a secret. His officers are expecting to campaign against the Fatimids, but instead the emperor encamps near the city of Theodosiopolis, the capital of the newly established Iberian theme. From there, Basil requests all his Caucasian allies, including the young George, to visit and pay respects to him. When, quite expectedly, the Georgian king fails to respect the summons, Basil destroys nearby Georgian towns and begins to mobilize his...
Yeah, it makes sense if you're going on to this area, especially, I will say again, as I say in many videos, instant communication is such an insanely revolutionary idea that changes everything when it comes to warfare. And so when you're going over here and you have people who say they will ally with you, you have to go and seek if they're still with you, with the possible assumption that they won't come, and then you do what is needed. So, very decisive action by Basil.
Force for an invasion of the kingdom. And begins to mobilize his force for an invasion of the kingdom. In return, George invades Roman territory and burns the town of Oltisi, which Basil had likely planned to use as a stopping point for resupply. Following that, the young king immediately heads back northwards. Closely following every movement of his opponent, Basil moves in his direction. The Roman and Georgian
It's cool to see the modern capitals, Yerevan and Tbilisi.
armies are divided by a considerable distance. Yet once again, the mobility of Basil's army would be the determining factor in the outcome of the conflict. As George marches his men through a swampy area named Shrimni just to the west of Lake Palakazio, now known as Lake Childir, the southernmost section of his army is attacked by the vanguard of the Roman cavalry. The king quickly comes to the realization that Basil has somehow overtaken him. Wasting no time, George hastens the main body of his men, leaving the engaged portion of the army to fend for itself.
Wow.
Luckily for him, the commander of the southern Georgian contingents, Liparitis, proves to be sturdy. The attack of the Roman vanguard is repulsed. Yet soon, the Caucasian contingent is forced to face an attack from the recently arrived Roman main force. Incredibly, this assault is repulsed again.
Wow. To be able to not disperse and to continue fighting in some organized manner after believing your leader abandoned you is insane. Respect.
Eventually, the strength of Liparitis and his men begins to leave them. Stuck in the mud and with the bulk of the Georgian army having already escaped to safety, the small contingent faces one final Roman assault. This proves to be the finishing blow for Liparitis and his men. Despite winning the engagement,
valiant effort in the face of abandonment.
Basil has failed to achieve his goal of intercepting the entirety of the Georgian army. Liparitis' heroic stance enables George and his men to escape to the mountains, where they are joined by allies from the Caucasus.
Undeserved.
Angered by this fact, Basil wreaks havoc in mainland Georgia for the entirety of the remaining autumn.
The Caucasus are here, which are extremely... They're even taller than the Alps are. And so this terrain has got to be not easy to traverse.
During settlements from 12 different Georgian provinces. At the end of 1021, the emperor withdraws to winter quarters in the Black Sea port city of Trebizond. While staying there, the Basilius opens negotiations with George, which would continue in an atmosphere of distrust throughout the year. In the meantime, Basil secures a massive addition to his empire in December. Unable to defend his lands from Kurdish and Turkic raids, the Armenian king of Vaspurakin, Senecherim, surrenders his kingdom to Basil in return for an estate deeper into Anatolia. By this point, the old emperor has made it a tradition of his to acquire vast territories in the east without sacrificing a single Roman soldier. This positive development is tempered by an unexpected revolt in Anatolia, which catches the emperor unprepared while he is still in Trabzon. Nikephoros Xiphias, the hero from Clydion who played a crucial role in Basil's Bulgarian conquest, is now preparing to stab his monarch in the back. The 64-year-old Basil has not sired any heirs, having spent his entire reign on the frontier without marrying. As such, the throne seems ripe for the picking. And thus, Xiphias, a former friend and a trusted general of Basil, revolts against his suzerain.
Wow. So that shows how actually having an heir is also beneficial to conquest, because it makes it less likely for internal rebellion or betrayal to happen. Interesting.
Shortly after his exploits at Clydion, Xiphias had been put in control of the province of Anatolikon, a region that is essentially in the backyard of Basil's current theater of war. The general turned rebel teams up with a certain magnate named Nikephoros Phokas, the son of Bardas Phokas, but unfortunately for the two men, the revolt would only gather supporters in Cappadocia. While the Phokas name carries significant weight in Anatolia, Xiphias was a stranger to the local elites. His past exploits in the west did not do much to increase his popularity in the east. Unsurprisingly, the relationship between Xiphias and Phocas quickly becomes strained. Allowing jealousy to get the best of him, the governor of Anatolikon kills Phocas in August. Following
Not a good start.
the revolt collapses. Eventually, Xiphias' bid for the throne ends in his arrest. The general is spared and forced to
Jesus Christ. That was an absolute failure.
become a monk by Basil, who likely still... The general is spared and forced to become a monk by Basil, who likely still holds respect for his former friend. In the meantime, King George has begun to show willingness to negotiate for peace. This proves to be a bluff, though, as George is evidently looking for an opening to attack. Around September, the Georgians invade the region of Vajian. Basil answers by moving his army from the fort of Mazdat, where his men have been stationed throughout most of 1022.
Theodosiopoulos.
As the emperor is moving close, he expects George to shy away from an open battle. Yet instead of pursuit, the emperor gets ambushed, a military tactic to which he had grown accustomed in the long decades of his reign. In the mid-autumn, the imperial army has encamped close to a town named Svindax. Otherwise thorough in his reconnaissance, Basil, who was perhaps confident that the Caucasian army would not dare a confrontation, fails to properly scout the area. As such, the emperor does not spot the incoming Georgian army, which immediately launches an assault upon its arrival. As the Roman army files out of its encampment, George orders his cavalry to attack. The Georgian horse follows up the infantry advance and clashes with the surprised Romans. Although their attack is frantic and disorganized, the Georgians inflict serious damage to the Romans. The engaged imperial units are soon turned to flight. Quick to believe the battle had been won, the Georgian cavalry leaves the battlefield to plunder the Roman camp, exposing George and his infantry. Further away, Basil successfully regroups his fleeing men. With his Varangians leading the way, the emperor clashes against the Georgian foot.
Jesus.
The fight isn't even a contest, as the Romans quickly began mauling George's exposed infantry. The raiding Georgian cavalry
Guys, come back. Come back.
attempts to aid their king, but to no avail. Their horses are rendered useless from the heavy booty they insist on carrying with them.
Oh my god.
With his army beginning to suffer severe losses, George orders a retreat. Eventually, after suffering...
That's the thing about being a cavalryman, is that you have the ability to flee where others do not. And I don't know how much safer you are as a cavalryman compared to an infantryman in battle when you're engaging the enemy. But regardless, even if it's close, it seems like being someone on a horse is a safe bet.
Bring more casualties along the way. The king and his surviving men manage to make it to the safety of the nearby Tzionis castle. Basil has accomplished his goal, and the Georgian king has been decisively defeated in a single encounter. Seeing the writing on the wall, George decides to relent and accept Basil's peace terms. The territory he had occupied back in 1014 is returned to Constantinople. To make sure George would...
To actually be as audacious as he was, as the Georgian army was under George I, and actually win when Basil wasn't expecting you to have a confrontation, only to lose the war and secede the territory because your cavalry went ahead to plunder stuff in the camp, is so... I don't even know what word to use. is so disappointing.
be true to his word, the emperor takes his young son Bagrat.
Also, I don't want to take away from the ability of Basil and his armies to be able to regroup after a semi-rout or a semi-retreat.
As an honorary hostage. Basil has once again successfully secured the East.
This dude's nuts.
By 1023, the Basilius is back in Constantinople. Ignoring the fact that he is approaching 70, the emperor turns his eyes to the west, preparing to retake Sicily for his empire. Yet this final invasion was not to be. Basil II passed away on the 15th of December 1025, after residing on the Roman throne for nearly 50 years.
Ugh. Guys, these are like my TV shows, watching history videos. They are really like my TV shows. I don't watch a lot of TV or movies, all right? And so it's like seeing one of my favorite characters die. It hurts a bit, but man, is he impressive.
Years. He was buried at the Church of the Holy Apostles, taking his deserved place of rest, next to the other giant figures of Roman histories, such as Constantine and Justinian. Basil's story was a unique one. Unlike other great conquerors of history, the Bulgar Slayer wasn't born with any natural talent for warfare. He did not have a military upbringing or an imposing outside appearance. What Basil managed to achieve was the result of sheer determination and an unrivaled devotion to his imperial occupation. Inheriting the Roman Empire as a sickly boy, dominated by advisors and power-hungry nobles, and leaving it as one of the greatest rulers known to Eastern Roman history.
The dude is an absolute legend, okay? Oops. Absolute legend. The idea that anything is a fluke, that I often think of when I see military conquerors in history videos. There's just no question that he is not a fluke. He faced enormous power, or maybe not enormous powers, but enormous threats from every side of his empire, and did better in his situation, in his life, that anyone could possibly do. That's what's so crazy, is that I don't think any single person could have done better in his lifetime, in his time of rule, than he did. It's insane. Time and time again. The only time I remember having a little trouble was an early on interaction with some a bit further north parties in this part of modern day Turkey, this part here. He proved time and time again he was extremely intelligent and was an amazing strategician. He had amazing strategic prowess. Absolutely amazing. Love y'all. Hope you're all doing well. Rest in peace, Basil II, Bulgar Slayer. Yeah. Would appreciate any comments down below. Hope you're all doing well. And hopefully I'll see you guys next time. We'll keep on learning. Bye, guys.